You're nothing without me, Sarah. Nothing but a washed-up housewife who couldn't even keep her figure after popping out 3 kids. Those words still echo in my mind, not because they hurt, though God knows they did, but because of what happened next. Because of what I did when I finally discovered the truth about the man I'd given 23 years of my life to. My name is Sarah Chen, and until 6 months ago, I thought I knew exactly who I was, a devoted wife, a loving mother, and the woman who'd sacrificed everything to build an empire with a man who saw me as nothing more than convenient help. But that night, that terrible, beautiful night when everything changed, I learned something that would destroy him completely, and he never saw it coming. Mom, why are you even here? My oldest son, Michael, had asked me at the family dinner, the one where they'd all gathered to celebrate my husband's new engagement. Yes, you heard that right. His engagement. While we were still married, Dad's moved on. Maybe you should too. The laughter around that table, my mother-in-law's cackling, my sister-in-law's smirking, even my own children nodding along. It was like being slowly skinned alive in front of an audience that was enjoying the show. But I sat there, hands folded in my lap, burning inside with a secret that would change everything. Because 3 hours earlier I'd found the documents in his office, the ones he'd forgotten about, the ones that proved everything I'd suspected but never dared to believe. That was the night I decided to destroy him. And I did it with a smile. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me properly introduce myself to those of you who are new here. Welcome to Stories Grandma Never Told, the place where real people share the shocking truths about their lives that they've never told anyone else. I'm Sarah Chen. I'm 47 years old, though most days I feel like I've lived 100 lifetimes. I live in San Francisco now, in a penthouse apartment that overlooks the bay, a far cry from the cramped studio apartment I started in when I first met David. That's his real name, by the way. David Chen. You might have heard of him if you follow tech news. He's the CEO of Chen Technologies, the company that everyone thinks he built from nothing. Everyone thinks wrong. Before I tell you what happened that night, before I reveal the secret that brought him to his knees, you need to understand the full story. You need to know exactly what this man put me through, what I sacrificed, and why, when the moment finally came, I felt no guilt whatsoever about what I did. So let me take you back 23 years to when I was young, naive, and desperately in love with a man who would slowly, methodically destroy everything I was. I met David Chen in 1999 at a coffee shop near Stanford University. I was 24, fresh out of my computer science master's program, with 3 job offers from major tech companies. He was 26, a struggling entrepreneur with big dreams and empty pockets. "You're brilliant," he'd told me on our 3rd date, his eyes shining with that intensity that had first drawn me to him. Together, we could build something incredible, something that changes the world. I believed him. God help me, I believed every word. Within 6 months, we were married. Within a year, I'd turned down all 3 job offers to help him build his startup. "It's our company," he'd said, holding my hands as we worked 18-hour days in our garage. "Everything we build together." But there was never any paperwork with my name on it. I was too in love to notice. Our first son, Michael, was born in 2001, right as the dot-com bubble burst. I'll never forget the night I went into labor. David was at an investor meeting, trying to save our company from bankruptcy. I drove myself to the hospital, breathing through contractions, because we couldn't afford a taxi, and he wouldn't answer his phone. "Why didn't you wait?" he'd asked when he finally showed up 8 hours after Michael was born. "You made me look bad in front of the nurses. That should have been my first warning." But when you're holding your newborn son, exhausted and overwhelmed, you tell yourself stories. You say he's just stressed. You say it will get better. It never got better. By 2003, I'd written the algorithm that would make Chen Technologies worth millions. I did it while nursing our second son, James, with our toddler Michael playing at my feet. The code that would eventually be patented, David's name, alone on the patent of course, was typed one-handed while I pumped breast milk at 3 a.m. "You don't need credit," David had said when I'd asked why my name wasn't on the patent application. "We're married. What's mine is yours, right?" But nothing was ever mine. Not really. The company grew. We moved from our 1-bedroom apartment to a 2-bedroom house in Palo Alto. Then, after our daughter Emma was born in 2005, to a 4-bedroom in Los Altos Hills. From the outside, we looked like the perfect Silicon Valley success story. but behind closed doors I was drowning. "Sarah, you've gotten fat," David announced at dinner one night in 2007. The kids were eating their chicken nuggets, and he said it like he was commenting on the weather. "It's embarrassing when we go to company events." I was 5'4" and weighed 140 pounds. I'd gained maybe 15 pounds since college, after 3 pregnancies and countless sleepless nights debugging code while he slept. "Maybe if you helped with the kids, I'd have time for the gym," I'd said quietly. He laughed. Actually laughed. "Help with the kids? That's your job. I make the money." Except I was still doing half the coding. Still fixing every bug, still innovating every solution. I just did it after midnight, when the kids were asleep and the house was quiet. The first time he humiliated me publicly was at his company Christmas party in 2008. Chen Technologies had just closed a Series B funding round for $30 million. The algorithm I'd refined had impressed every investor. "There's the genius behind it all," one of the VCs had said, approaching David and me at the bar. "You're too kind," David had replied, his arm around my waist. "Though between you and me, Sarah here mostly just keeps the home fires burning. The real innovation happens at the office." The VC had looked at me with something like pity. I'd stood there in the dress I'd bought specifically for this party, the one David had said made me look almost presentable, and smiled. "That's right," I'd heard myself say, "I'm just the wife." But that night, when everyone was asleep, I'd gone to his home office and looked at the code he'd been struggling with for weeks. A payment processing issue that was holding up a major contract. I fixed it in 3 hours, left the solution on his desktop, and went to bed. He took credit for it the next day, of course. Got a bonus for it, too. $50,000 that went into an account I didn't have access to. "For the family's future," he'd said when I asked about it. I found out about the first affair in 2010. Her name was Jennifer, a marketing coordinator at the company. 23 years old, blonde, everything I wasn't anymore. I'd discovered them by accident. Emma had gotten sick at school, and when I couldn't reach David, I'd driven to the office to find him. His assistant said he was in a meeting, but his calendar was clear. I'd walked to his office thinking maybe he was catching up on work. The sounds I heard through that door, I don't need to describe them, you can imagine. I'd stood there for a full minute, frozen, my hand on the doorknob. Then I'd walked back to my car, picked up Emma from school, and made dinner like nothing had happened. "How was your day?" I'd asked him that night. "Busy," he'd said, not looking up from his phone. "Back-to-back meetings." I'd nodded and served him his favorite meal, lamb biryani that took me 4 hours to make from scratch. He'd eaten it while texting someone, smiling at his screen. Jennifer lasted 6 months before he got bored. Then there was Monica. Then Luis from accounting. Yes, Luis. Then a string of others whose names I didn't bother learning. By 2012, Chen Technologies was worth over $100 million. We lived in a $7 million house. The kids went to private schools. I drove a Tesla that was registered in David's name, lived on an allowance he transferred to my account monthly. $5,000 should be more than enough, he'd said, when I'd asked for more to cover Michael's SAT prep courses. Learn to budget better. $5,000 a month to run a household, raise 3 kids, and maintain the image he demanded. Meanwhile, I knew he was spending $30,000 monthly on his personal expenses, dinners, trips, gifts for his various partners. I started selling things. My jewelry first, pieces my grandmother had left me, then designer bags he'd bought me in the early years when he still pretended to care. I hid the money in a safety deposit box he didn't know about, telling myself it was for emergencies. I didn't know then that I was preparing for war. The cruelest blow came from my own children. David had spent years poisoning them against me, drop by drop, comment by comment. "Your mother never worked a day in her life. Your mother doesn't understand business. Your mother is why I'm stressed all the time." By the time Michael was 18, he looked at me the way David did. With a mixture of contempt and pity. "Dad says you trapped him," Michael told me one day in 2019, home from MIT for winter break. "Got pregnant on purpose to make him marry you." "Michael, I had a master's degree from Stanford. I had job offers." "Yeah, right," he'd laughed. "Dad showed me your transcripts. You barely graduated." David had forged documents, created an entire false history to show our children. And they believed him, because why wouldn't they? He was the successful CEO. I was just the housewife who'd let herself go. James, our middle child, was kinder but distant. He'd learned to navigate by staying neutral, never taking sides. "I don't want to get involved in your marriage problems," he'd say whenever I tried to talk to him. Emma, my baby, broke my heart the most. At 16, she'd started dating an older boy who treated her exactly like David treated me. When I tried to warn her, she'd screamed at me, "You're just jealous because Dad doesn't love you anymore. You're bitter and pathetic, and I'm never going to end up like you." That night, I'd cried in my bathroom until I threw up. Then I'd cleaned myself up, because David was having another dinner party, and I needed to play the perfect hostess. David's mother, Linda, had hated me from day one. In her eyes, her precious son had married beneath him, never mind that my family had been in San Francisco for 3 generations, or that I'd graduated summa cum laude. "A Chinese girl should know how to keep a man happy," she'd say in Mandarin, thinking I didn't understand. But my grandmother had taught me well. I understood every cruel word. At family dinners, she'd criticize everything. My cooking was too salty or too bland. My house was too modern or too traditional. My children were too American or not American enough. "This is why David needs to find comfort elsewhere," she'd said loudly at Thanksgiving 2019, after I'd spent 2 days cooking for 20 people. A real wife would keep her husband satisfied. Everyone had laughed. My sister-in-law, David's brother, the cousins, even my own children had smirked. I'd excused myself to the kitchen and stood there, gripping the counter until my knuckles went white. But I didn't cry. I'd stopped crying by then. I was planning. By 2020, David wasn't even trying to hide his affairs anymore. He'd bring women to company events, introducing them as consultants or advisors while I stood right there. The humiliation was deliberate, calculated. "This is Natasha," he'd said at a fundraising gala, his hand on the lower back of a woman young enough to be our daughter. "She's helping me explore new ventures." The way he'd emphasized explore, the way she'd giggled, everyone knew exactly what kind of ventures they were exploring. "Nice to meet you," I'd said, extending my hand. She'd looked at it like I was offering her something contaminated. "Oh, you're the wife," she'd said, not taking my hand. "David's told me so much about you." The smirk on her face told me exactly what he'd said. But here's what David didn't know. I'd started documenting everything, every affair, every hidden bank account, every diverted fund. I'd learned to hack into his devices years ago, the benefit of that computer science degree he claimed I'd barely earned. Natasha lasted 3 months. The breakup was ugly. She'd threatened to sue him for sexual harassment when he got bored. I'd watched him panic, scrambling to pay her off with company funds. I documented that too. "I want a divorce," David announced in January 2021, over breakfast, as casually as if he was asking for more coffee. The kids were all home. COVID had brought them back, and he'd chosen that moment deliberately. An audience for my humiliation. Finally, Michael had said it's about time. Emma had nodded. "You'll be happier, Dad." Only James had stayed quiet, staring at his plate. "I've already talked to my lawyer," David continued. "You'll get the minimum required by law. The prenup you signed is ironclad." The prenup, the one he'd presented to me the night before our wedding, when all the guests had already arrived. "Just a formality," he'd said. "It'll never matter." "I need time to find a lawyer," I'd said quietly. He'd laughed. "With what money? Besides, every decent divorce attorney in the Bay Area won't touch this case. I've made sure of that." He had too. I'd called 17 lawyers. They'd all said the same thing: conflict of interest, prior engagement, unable to take the case. David had put them all on retainer just to block me. But David had made one crucial mistake. He'd assumed I was as helpless as he'd tried to make me. The night that changed everything started like any other. It was March 2021, and David was at another business dinner. The kids were in their rooms avoiding me as usual. I was in the kitchen, cleaning up after cooking a meal no one had bothered to eat with me. His home office door was usually locked, but that night he'd forgotten. Or maybe he'd just gotten careless, assuming I was too beaten down to snoop. I went in looking for printer paper. What I found changed everything. There, on his desk, was a folder marked Succession Planning. Inside were documents I'd never seen before, documents that made my blood run cold, then hot, then cold again. The original incorporation papers for Chen Technologies. The ones I'd signed in 1999, thinking I was just witnessing his signature. I hadn't been a witness. I'd been a CO founder, 50% owner. My hands shook as I read through the documents. For 22 years I'd owned half of everything, and he'd hidden it from me. Forged my signatures on other documents to transfer shares, created shell companies to obscure ownership, built an elaborate lie that had required constant maintenance. But he'd kept the originals. Maybe out of paranoia, maybe out of some weird compulsion to keep trophies of his deception, and now I had them. I photographed every page, then found more, so much more. The real patent applications, with my name listed as primary inventor. Bank accounts in the Cayman Islands with hundreds of millions hidden away. Evidence of tax fraud that would destroy him. Communications with board members about forcing me out without compensation. And then, the crown jewel, an email thread from a week ago, discussing his plan to have me committed to a psychiatric facility. "She's becoming unstable," he'd written. "If we can get her declared mentally incompetent, the divorce becomes much simpler." The response from his lawyer: "We'll need at least 2 doctors to sign off. I know people who can help." They were planning to have me institutionalized, to take everything and lock me away. I sat there in his chair, in the office I'd rarely been allowed to enter, and I laughed. I laughed until tears streamed down my face, laughed until my ribs hurt, laughed until Emma came to check on me. "Mom, are you okay?" I looked at my daughter, this child who'd been turned against me, who thought I was pathetic and weak, and I smiled. "I'm perfect, sweetheart. Absolutely perfect." I gave him nothing, no sign that I knew, no hint that anything had changed. I continued playing the broken housewife, the pathetic, abandoned woman he expected me to be. "Please, David," I'd beg when the kids were around. "Can't we work this out? I'll do better. I'll lose weight. I'll be whatever you want me to be." The disgust on my children's faces hurt more than David's smirk, but I endured it. Every night, after everyone was asleep, I worked. I hired a lawyer in New York, one David had no connections to, and sent her everything. I opened bank accounts he couldn't trace. I reached out to former employees who'd been wronged by him, building a network of allies who'd been waiting for someone to stand up to David Chen, and I started writing code again. Not for him, for me. A program that would track every keystroke on his devices, every transaction, every communication. He'd taught me to be invisible, to work in the shadows. Now I used those skills against him. The irony was delicious. As spring turned to summer, David's cruelty reached new heights. He was bringing Natasha to the house now, even though I still lived there. "This is my home," he'd said when I'd protested. "If you don't like it, leave." But leaving would have meant abandoning my position. So I stayed and endured. I endured Natasha using my kitchen, wearing my apron, cooking with my pots and pans. I endured her leaving her things in my bedroom. Yes, my bedroom, the one David had moved out of years ago but apparently still felt entitled to use for his adventures. I endured my children calling her dad's girlfriend and inviting her to family dinners while I ate alone in the kitchen. "You should be grateful, Linda," my mother-in-law told me one Sunday. "At least he's not divorcing you yet. Some women would kill to be in your position." The position of being publicly replaced while still technically married? The position of being a ghost in my own home? "You're right," I'd said, bowing my head. "I'm very grateful." Linda had patted my shoulder with condescension that made my skin crawl. "Finally, you're learning your place. My place. After 22 years of building the company that made them all rich, after sacrificing my career, my body, my sanity, my place was to be grateful for scraps. But Linda didn't know what I knew. None of them did. In July 2021, Chen Technologies started having problems. Small things at first. Glitches in the payment system, errors in the inventory database, customer complaints about delayed shipments. "It's sabotage," David raged at dinner one night. "Someone's attacking us from the inside." "That's terrible, honey," I'd said, serving him his favorite wine. "Do you have any idea who?" "When I find out, I'll destroy them," he'd sworn. "I'll make them regret the day they were born." I'd nodded sympathetically while mentally adjusting the code I'd written. The beautiful thing about being invisible for so long was that no one noticed when you were actually doing something. The problems escalated. A major contract fell through when confidential emails were accidentally sent to competitors. The board started asking uncomfortable questions about financial discrepancies. Discrepancies I'd carefully brought to light through anonymous tips. "Someone knows too much," David told his lawyer on a call I wasn't supposed to overhear. "It has to be an employee. Maybe one of the engineers I fired last year." Never once did he suspect me. After all, I was just the pathetic housewife who didn't understand business. The dinner that broke me, really truly broke something inside me, happened in August 2021. David had invited everyone, his parents, siblings, my children, and of course, Natasha. The purpose, he'd announced, was to celebrate new beginnings. I'd spent 3 days preparing the meal. Not because I wanted to, but because David had demanded it. "If you're going to live in my house, you'll earn your keep," he'd said. "Cook something decent for once." So I'd cooked. 7 courses, each one perfect, each one a dish that had special meaning in our history together. The lamb biryani from our first date, the chocolate souffle I'd made when Michael was born, the spring rolls my grandmother had taught me, the ones David used to say were better than any restaurants. I'd presented each dish with a small story, a memory of our life together. David had rolled his eyes at each one. The children had looked embarrassed. Natasha had laughed, actually laughed, at my pathetic attempts to remind them of better times. "This is exactly why we needed this dinner," David had announced after the main course. He'd stood up, champagne glass in hand, Natasha rising beside him. "I wanted you all here to witness this moment," he'd continued, "to celebrate as I officially proposed to the woman who's brought light back into my life. And then, right there, in the dining room of the house I'd made a home, in front of the children I'd raised, he'd gotten down on one knee and proposed to Natasha, while still married to me. "Yes," she'd squealed, and everyone had applauded. My own children, his family, everyone except me. "Isn't this illegal?" James had asked quietly. "The divorce will be final soon enough," David had said, waving his hand dismissively. "This is just a promise for the future." I'd sat there, hands folded in my lap, a smile frozen on my face, as they toasted to David and Natasha's future. As my mother-in-law talked about wedding plans. As my daughter Emma offered to be a bridesmaid. "What about Mom?" James had asked. "What about her?" David had responded. "Sarah knows her time is over, don't you, Sarah?" Every eye had turned to me, waiting, expecting me to break, to cry, to beg. "Of course," I'd said, raising my own glass. "To new beginnings." The surprise on David's face had been worth it. He'd expected tears, not compliance. It threw him off, made him suspicious. Good. Let him wonder. 2 weeks after that dinner, I made another discovery that changed everything. I'd been searching through old files in the garage. David had banished most of my things there when I'd found a box of documents from his father's estate. David's father had died in 2018, supposedly leaving everything to David and his siblings. But there, in that dusty box, was a different will. The real one. David's father had left 40% of his estate to me. Not to David, to me. For Sarah, the will read, who has been more of a successor to my business legacy than my own son, who built what David takes credit for. May she finally receive what she deserves. 40% of an estate worth $80 million, $32 million that David had hidden from me, forged documents to steal from me, convinced his siblings I'd never been mentioned in the will at all. I sat on the garage floor, surrounded by boxes of my life's remnants, holding proof of yet another betrayal. But also, and this was the beautiful part, holding leverage that David didn't know existed. His father had known, had seen what I'd contributed, what I'd built, had tried to make it right. I photographed everything, sent it to my lawyer, and carefully placed the original back where I'd found it. David would never know I knew until the moment I wanted him to. In September 2021, I collapsed in the kitchen. The stress, the constant emotional warfare, the sleepless nights, it had all finally caught up. James found me on the floor, barely conscious, and called 911. At the hospital, the doctors ran tests. Severe exhaustion, dangerously high blood pressure, early signs of heart disease. "You're killing yourself," the doctor told me bluntly. "Whatever is causing this level of stress needs to stop, or you won't make it another year." David never came to the hospital. Not once in the 3 days I was there. "Dad's busy with the IPO roadshow," Michael explained when he visited. "You understand, right? The IPO. Chen Technologies was going public. The company I'd helped build from nothing was about to be worth billions, and David was making sure I'd get none of it." "I understand perfectly," I'd told Michael. Emma visited once, spending the entire time on her phone. Natasha's helping Dad pick out a new house, she'd mentioned casually. Something without all the bad memories. Only James showed any concern. "Mom, are you really okay?" he'd asked when we were alone. "I will be," I'd promised him. "Very soon, I will be." The day after I got home from the hospital, David made his move. 2 doctors showed up at the house with a court order for a psychiatric evaluation. "Mrs. Chen," the first doctor said, "we're here to assess your mental state. Your husband has expressed concerns about your well-being. They asked me questions for 3 hours about my feelings, my thoughts, my plans. I answered everything perfectly rationally, calmly, even cheerfully. I understand my husband's concerns," I said. "This divorce has been difficult, but I'm handling it well. I have hobbies, friends, plans for the future, lies, all lies, but delivered with the perfect smile of a woman who is completely, utterly sane." "Have you had thoughts of harming yourself or others?" the second doctor asked. "Never," I lied smoothly. "I believe in karma. People get what they deserve eventually." They left without the diagnosis David had paid them for. I was too stable, too rational. They couldn't commit me without cause. That night, David raged. I heard him throwing things in his office, screaming at someone on the phone. "I paid you $30,000. Do your fucking job." I lay in my bed, smiling in the dark. He was getting desperate. Good. Thanksgiving 2021 was held at Linda's house. I wasn't invited, officially, but David demanded I come anyway. "You'll cook," he'd ordered. "My mother's getting old. Someone needs to do the work." So I'd arrived at dawn to prepare dinner for 30 people who hated me. I cooked in Linda's kitchen while she criticized every move. I served food while Natasha sat in my place at the table. I cleaned while they all talked about how much better next year would be without me. "Once the divorce is final," David announced over dessert, "Natasha and I will be married immediately. We're thinking Hawaii. Family only, of course." "Will Mom be invited?" James asked. The table went silent. "Why would she be?" Emma asked, genuinely puzzled. "She's not family anymore. She'll always be your mother," James insisted. "Unfortunately," Michael added, and everyone laughed. I was in the kitchen, washing dishes, listening to my children disown me. My hands were in scalding water, and I pressed them deeper, letting the pain ground me. Soon, I told myself. Very soon. As December approached, the IPO preparations intensified. Chen Technologies was valued at $2.5 billion. David's stake would make him worth over $1 billion personally. What he didn't know was that I'd been busy. My lawyer had filed injunctions in multiple jurisdictions, challenging the ownership structure based on the original incorporation documents. But we'd done it sealed, quietly, timing it so David wouldn't know until the last possible moment. I'd also been in touch with the SEC through anonymous channels, raising questions about financial irregularities that would trigger an investigation, but only after I pulled the trigger. "The IPO is everything," David told someone on the phone one night. "Once it goes through, I'm untouchable." He was wrong. The IPO would be his downfall. I'd made sure of it. David served me with divorce papers on Christmas morning, in front of the children, while they were opening presents. "Merry Christmas, Sarah," he'd said, handing me the envelope with a smile. "Consider it a gift. You're finally free." The papers were brutal. I'd get the house, mortgaged to the hilt, worth less than what was owed. Monthly alimony of $5,000 for 2 years. No stake in the company, no retirement savings, nothing from the foreign accounts. "This is generous," David's lawyer, who'd come to witness my signature, told me. "Mr. Chen could have given you much less. Where am I supposed to sign?" I asked calmly. The surprise on everyone's faces was almost comical. They'd expected a fight, tears, begging. "Right here," the lawyer pointed, "and here, initial here." I signed every page without reading them, handed them back with a smile. "There you go." "That's it?" David asked, suspicious. "You're not going to contest anything?" "What would be the point?" I replied. "You've already won, haven't you?" He stared at me for a long moment, trying to read something in my face. But I'd learned to be invisible, to show nothing. "Yes," he finally said, "I have. If only he knew." January 1st, 2022. The family gathered at David's, I couldn't call it our house anymore, for their annual New Year's party. I wasn't invited, but I came anyway. Someone had to cook after all. I was in the kitchen preparing appetizers when I overheard David on the phone in his study. The door was cracked, his voice carrying clearly. "The IPO launches in March," he was saying. "Once that happens, I'll have enough capital to buy Sarah out completely, the house, everything. She'll have nothing left to hold over me." "What about the kids?" the voice on speakerphone asked. His lawyer. "They're adults now. They've chosen their side. Sarah can rot in a studio apartment for all I care. And the commitment papers? Keep them ready. After the IPO, when she realizes she's truly lost everything, she'll break. That's when we move. A suicide attempt, maybe. Something that gives us grounds. You want me to arrange that? I want you to be ready when it happens naturally. And trust me, it will." I stood there, knife in hand, slicing vegetables with mechanical precision while listening to my husband plan my destruction. But the joke was on him. He thought I was already broken. He had no idea I was about to break him. February arrived with a fury of activity. The roadshow was in full swing, with David traveling constantly, promoting Chen Technologies to investors worldwide. The initial valuation had increased to $3 billion. Financial media was calling it the IPO of the year. I watched from the shadows as David did interview after interview, telling the story of how he'd built the company from nothing. "It was just me and a laptop in a garage," he told Forbes. "Every line of code, every innovation, every sacrifice, I did it all for my family." The journalist had asked about me once. "Your wife must be proud." My ex-wife, David had corrected sharply. She was supportive in her own way, but this success is mine alone. That interview would come back to haunt him. I made sure of it. Meanwhile, my lawyer had been busy, the sealed injunctions were ready, the SEC investigation was primed. We'd gathered statements from 17 former employees about David's business practices, his theft of intellectual property, his financial fraud. But the crown jewel was something else entirely, something I'd discovered in those original incorporation documents, a clause David had clearly forgotten about, buried in subsection 47B of the founding charter. In the event of an IPO, original founders had the right of first refusal on all shares. And I was an original founder. 1 week before the IPO, Linda organized a family dinner to celebrate. It would be held at the house, my former house, and I was explicitly not invited. "You're not welcome here," David had texted me. "Find somewhere else to be." But Emma had called me an hour before dinner, "Mom, Dad's not home yet, and Grandma needs help with the food. Would you mind?" Even after everything, I couldn't say no to my daughter. I arrived to find Linda in the kitchen, struggling with the meal she'd insisted on making herself. Finally, she snapped when she saw me. "Make yourself useful for once." I cooked in silence while the family gathered. David arrived with Natasha, both of them glowing with triumph. The IPO was days away. Their wedding was planned for the month after. My erasure from the family was nearly complete. "Sarah?" David said, seeing me in the kitchen. "What the hell are you doing here?" Emma asked me to help, I said quietly. "I'll leave as soon as dinner is served." "You'll leave now," he commanded. "Dad, I asked her to come," Emma protested weakly. "Grandma needed help." "Your grandmother doesn't need help from her," David spat. "She's not family anymore." "It's fine," I said, untying my apron. "The food is ready. I'll go." But as I walked past the dining room, Linda called out, "Sarah, you forgot to set the table. How typical." I stopped, turned back, and saw them all sitting there, my children, David's family, Natasha in my chair, waiting to be served one last time. "Of course," I said. "My mistake." I set the table around them, placing each plate with care, each glass with precision. They talked over me, through me, as if I wasn't there. Plans for the IPO party, plans for the wedding, plans for a future that didn't include me. "Mom looks tired," James observed quietly. "Exhausted from doing nothing all day, probably," Michael scoffed. Now," Natasha said with false sweetness. "We should be kind. It must be hard, watching everyone else succeed while you fail." The table erupted in laughter. Even Emma giggled. I finished setting the table and walked to the door, but before I left, I turned back. "Enjoy your dinner," I said. "It might be your last one like this." "Is that a threat?" David stood up, aggressive. "No," I replied calmly. "Just an observation. Things change fast in Silicon Valley. You taught me that." I left them there, confused and irritated, and drove home to my small apartment, the one I'd rented after being forced from the house. They had no idea what was coming. In 3 days, their world would implode. March 14th, 2022. The night before the IPO, David threw a massive party at the Four Seasons. Everyone who mattered in Silicon Valley was there. I wasn't invited, naturally, but I had my sources. He's telling everyone you're dead. My friend Patricia texted me from the party. She was the wife of another tech CEO, one of the few who'd remained loyal to me. Actually said you passed away from stress-related illness. I laughed so hard I nearly spilled my wine. Dead. He was telling people I was dead while I sat in my apartment, very much alive, with a glass of champagne and a laptop showing all the sealed court documents that would be released in exactly 9 hours. Let him, I texted back. Resurrection stories are always dramatic. At 11:47 p.m., David called me. Drunk, jubilant, cruel. Tomorrow, I become a billionaire, he slurred. And you become nothing, less than nothing. A footnote in my success story. Congratulations, David, I said evenly. That's it? No begging? No tears? What would be the point? God, you're pathetic, he spat. 23 years and you never fought for anything. Never stood up for yourself. You're exactly what I always said. Weak, worthless, nothing. You're right, I agreed. I never fought. At least you can admit it. Good night, David. Sleep well. Fuck you, Sarah. He hung up. I set down my phone and opened my laptop. My lawyer was online, waiting. Are we ready? She asked via secure message. Release everything at 6 a.m., I typed, before markets open. Are you sure? Once we do this, there's no going back. I thought about 23 years of sacrifice, of humiliation, of being erased, piece by piece, until even my children saw me as nothing. I'm sure, I typed. End him. I woke at 5:30 a.m., made coffee, and sat in front of my laptop. At exactly 6 a.m., the first filing hit Edgar, the SEC's database. Injunction filed against Chen Technologies IPO. Ownership dispute by 6:15. The second wave arrived. SEC opens investigation into Chen Technologies' financial irregularities. By 6:30, the third strike. Original founder Sarah Chen claims 50% ownership of company. My phone exploded. Calls from numbers I didn't recognize. Reporters, investors, board members. I ignored them all except one. David called at 6:47 a.m. What have you done? He screamed. I fought, I said simply. Finally. You're lying. You own nothing. The prenup is void, David. Fraudulent contracts aren't enforceable. My lawyer has all the original documents. The real ones. The ones you hid. You stupid bitch, I'll destroy you. You already tried. How's that working out? The IPO was suspended at 7 a.m. By 8 a.m., Chen Technologies' valuation had dropped 40%. By noon, the board had called an emergency meeting. I attended via Zoom, my lawyer beside me. Mrs. Chen, the board chair began, these are serious allegations. They're not allegations, I replied, sharing my screen. Here are the original incorporation documents. Here are the patents filed in my name that were later falsified. Here are the financial records showing systematic fraud. And here, I paused for effect, is David's father's real will, leaving 40% of his estate to me, which David stole. The board members' faces were a symphony of shock and horror. You have no proof, David shouted from across the conference table. I have everything, I said calmly. Every email, every document, every forged signature. 23 years of evidence that you built this company on theft. Theft from me, from employees, from investors. Even if this is true, another board member interjected. What do you want? What I've always owned. 50% of Chen Technologies. And David's immediate removal as CEO. This is insane, David raged. I built this company. No, I said, looking directly into the camera so he could see my eyes. We built this company. And then you stole it. But here's the beautiful part, David. You kept the evidence. All of it. Your ego wouldn't let you destroy the proof of what you'd done. The board voted unanimously to suspend David pending investigation. The IPO was canceled indefinitely. Within hours, 3 major investors had pulled out. The company valuation dropped to $900 million. David came to my apartment that night, pounded on my door, screaming threats. I'll kill you. Do you hear me? I'll fucking kill you. I called 911, staying calm as I reported the threat. The police arrived to find David attempting to break down my door. He was arrested for criminal threats and attempted breaking and entering. The arrest made the news. Tech CEO arrested for threatening ex-wife amid IPO scandal. Natasha left him that night, posted on Instagram that she couldn't be associated with someone so unstable. My children called me for the first time in months. Mom, what's happening? Emma cried. Dad's in jail? The news is saying terrible things. Your father made some mistakes, I said gently. They're catching up to him. But the company, our money, there it was. They were worried about the money. The company will survive, I assured her. New leadership will stabilize things. New leadership? Yes. The board has asked me to step in as interim CEO. The silence on the other end was deafening. You? Michael's voice came on. They'd put me on speaker. You're taking over? I'm taking back what was always mine, I corrected. 50% of the company. The board feels I'm the best person to lead through this transition, given that I wrote most of the code that made us valuable. You're lying, Michael said. Dad wrote everything. Your father hasn't written a line of code since 2002, I said. I have the GitHub logs to prove it. Every innovation, every breakthrough. That was me, working after you all went to bed, while your father was with his mistresses. Why should we believe you? Emma demanded. You don't have to. The forensic audit will prove everything. But ask yourself this. Why do you think your grandfather left me 40% of his estate? He knew the truth. What? Your father hid it from all of us. Your grandfather saw what I contributed and tried to make it right. David stole that too. I heard Emma crying, Michael cursing, James staying characteristically quiet. I have to go, I said. The board is waiting. But know this, I love you all, despite everything. When you're ready to hear the truth, I'll be here. I hung up on my children for the first time in their lives. The forensic audit took 3 weeks. When the results were released, they were worse than even I had expected. David had embezzled $47 million over 5 years. He'd falsified investor reports, inflated valuations, and bribed officials. The FBI opened a criminal investigation. But the part that made headlines was the confirmation of my role. Every major innovation that had built Chen Technologies had my digital fingerprint. The audit team recovered deleted commits, archived emails, development logs, all proving that I had been the technical genius behind the company. Sarah Chen, the hidden genius behind a billion-dollar fraud, ran in the Wall Street Journal. From housewife to CEO, the ultimate Silicon Valley revenge, published Forbes. David was released on bail, but his assets were frozen pending investigation. He had to move in with his mother. Linda called me, screaming, "You destroyed him. My son is ruined because of you." "Your son destroyed himself," I replied. "I just stopped hiding it. He gave you everything. He took everything. There's a difference. You manipulative bitch." I hung up. I didn't need to listen anymore. For 23 years I'd absorbed their abuse. No more. 2 months into my tenure as CEO, my children asked to meet. We gathered at a neutral location, a coffee shop in Palo Alto. They looked different, humbled. Emma had lost weight from stress. Michael's arrogance had dimmed. James looked relieved. We read the audit report, Michael began. All of it. I waited. The algorithm that made the company. You really wrote it? While you were sleeping in your crib, I confirmed. Debugging code while breastfeeding. Your father was at a bar. Why didn't you ever tell us? Emma asked, tears in her eyes. Would you have believed me? Your father spent years telling you I was nothing, showing you falsified documents to prove I was stupid. You believed him. He's our father, Emma protested weakly, and I'm your mother. But that didn't stop you from laughing when he proposed to another woman in front of me, didn't stop you from telling me I was pathetic, worthless, an embarrassment. They flinched at their own words thrown back at them. I'm sorry, James said quietly. It was the first time any of them had apologized. I know, I said. But sorry doesn't erase 20 years of cruelty. What do you want from us? Michael asked. Nothing, I said, and meant it. I spent your entire lives wanting your love, your respect, just a fraction of the affection you showered on your father. But you can't give what you don't have. That's not fair. Emma started. Fair? I laughed. Was it fair when you told me you'd rather die than end up like me? Was it fair when Michael said I'd trapped your father with pregnancy? Was it fair when you all applauded his engagement while I served you dinner? They had no answer. I love you, I continued. I'll always love you. You're my children. But I don't like any of you very much right now. And trust, respect, those have to be earned. You never earned mine. You just assumed you had it because I'm your mother. So what now? James asked. Now, you live with your choices. Your father is facing 20 years in federal prison. The fortune you thought you'd inherit is gone. It was built on fraud. You'll have to make your own way." "You're cutting us off?" Emma gasped. "I'm giving you what you gave me." "Nothing." That wasn't entirely true. I'd set up trust funds for each of them, modest ones, enough for emergencies, not enough for the lifestyle they'd grown accustomed to. But they didn't need to know that yet. They needed to feel what I'd felt, just for a while. David's trial began in September 2022. I was called as a witness. The courtroom was packed, media, tech industry figures, and in the back, my children and David's family. David looked diminished. The designer suits were gone, replaced by a cheap gray outfit. The arrogance had faded into desperation. "Mrs. Chen," the prosecutor began, "can you describe your role in founding Chen Technologies?" For 4 hours, I told the truth. Every late-night coding, every algorithm, every innovation. I presented evidence, timestamps, development logs, emails David had thought were deleted. He told me I was nothing, I said, looking directly at him. Said I was just a housewife who couldn't keep her figure. Meanwhile, I was building the empire he took credit for. David's lawyer tried to discredit me. "Isn't it true you're bitter about the divorce?" "I'm not bitter," I replied. "I'm free. You stole company documents." "I documented fraud." "There's a difference. You manipulated the board." I told them the truth. After 23 years of lies, the truth feels like manipulation to people who benefited from the deception. The jury deliberated for 6 hours, guilty on all counts: securities fraud, embezzlement, tax evasion, forgery. David was sentenced to 15 years in federal prison. As they led him away, he turned to me. "I loved you once," he said. "No," I replied. "You loved what I could do for you. That's not the same thing." But here's what no one knew. Not the board, not the media, not even my lawyer. The real secret I'd been sitting on for over a year. Chen Technologies wasn't the only company I'd founded. During those long nights when David thought I was crying myself to sleep, I'd been building something else, a competitor, a better version of everything Chen Technologies did, with none of the fraud, none of the stolen code. I'd incorporated it in Delaware under a shell company in 2015. For 7 years, I'd been slowly building it, filing patents under pseudonyms, developing revolutionary code that made Chen Technologies' offerings look like toys. It was called Phoenix Systems, and it was worth more than Chen Technologies had ever been. The night before I released the information about Phoenix Systems to the world, I met with the board of Chen Technologies one last time. "We're grateful for your leadership during this crisis," the chair said. "The company has stabilized under your guidance." "I'm glad," I said. "Which is why I need to inform you of a conflict of interest." They looked confused. "I own another company," I said simply. "Phoenix Systems. We go public next month." "What?" I slid the prospectus across the table. "Phoenix Systems, founded 2015, current valuation $4.7 billion. Our primary product launches next week. It will make Chen Technologies' entire product line obsolete." The board members stared at the documents in shock. You built a competitor?" "I built what Chen Technologies should have been," I corrected. "Without the fraud, without the theft, without the lies. Every line of code is mine, legally and ethically. Every patent is properly filed. Every innovation is documented." "This is corporate espionage," one member shouted. "No," I said, pulling out my phone to show them emails from my lawyer. "I was never legally an employee of Chen Technologies. David made sure of that. Said I was just a housewife, remember? Can't steal from a company you never worked for. You used insider knowledge. I used my own innovations that David stole from me. I'm just taking them back and improving them. Nothing Phoenix Systems does uses any Chen Technologies property. We're simply better." "Why are you telling us?" "Because I'm offering to buy Chen Technologies," I said. $1. "That's insulting." "That's generous," I countered. "Once Phoenix launches, Chen Technologies will be worthless. The tech is outdated, the reputation is destroyed, and your former CEO is in federal prison. I'm offering you a graceful exit." They had no choice. The merger was announced a week later. I owned both companies, combined them, and created the most valuable tech company in Silicon Valley. The day the Phoenix Systems IPO launched successfully, valuation, $5.2 billion, I called my children to my new office. the top floor of the tallest building in Palo Alto, with views of the entire Bay Area. They walked in nervously, taking in the massive space, the wall of awards, the team of assistants. "Mom?" Emma said uncertainly. "Sit," I said, gesturing to the conference table. I slid 3 folders across to them. "What's this?" Michael asked. "Your inheritance," I said. They opened the folders to find trust documents. Each of them would receive $50 million on their 30th birthday, but with conditions. "You have to earn it," I explained. 4-year degree, minimum, 2 years of work experience, in a company where your last name means nothing, documented volunteer work, and, I paused, a written apology to someone you've wronged. "An apology?" James asked. "A real one. Not, 'I'm sorry you felt that way' or 'I'm sorry but—' a genuine acknowledgement of harm caused and attempt to make amends." "To you?" Emma asked quietly. "To anyone you've wronged. I'm not the only person you 3 have hurt with your arrogance." Michael was doing math in his head. $50 million each? "But you're worth $2.6 billion, I finished. "The rest goes to charity, a foundation for women in tech who've been erased, silenced, or stolen from." "That's not fair," Emma protested. "It's more than fair, it's generous. Your father left you nothing but shame and debt. I'm giving you a chance at redemption and wealth. But you have to earn both." "What if we don't meet your conditions?" Michael asked. "Then you get what you always gave me. Nothing." They left with their folders, humbled and confused, but James lingered. "Mom, yes, I'm proud of you," he said. "I should have said that earlier. I should have stood up for you. I'm sorry I was a coward. It was the first genuine moment I'd had with any of my children in years." "Thank you," I said, and meant it. David wrote me a letter from prison. It arrived on the 1st anniversary of his sentencing. "Sarah, I know you'll probably throw this away without reading it, but I need to write it anyway. I've had a lot of time to think in here. About what I did, what I stole, what I destroyed. You want to know the pathetic truth? I was jealous. From the moment we met, I knew you were smarter than me, more talented, more capable, and instead of being proud of partnering with you truly, I was terrified. Terrified that everyone would see what I saw, that you were the real genius and I was just a good salesman. So I diminished you, erased you. Tried to make you small enough that I could feel big, but you were never small, even when I had you serving dinner to my mistress, even when I had our children laughing at you, even when I tried to have you committed. You were playing a longer game. I underestimated you. I thought your kindness was weakness, your patience was defeat. I was wrong. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I don't deserve it. I'm not asking for mercy. I earned this prison sentence. I'm just acknowledging what I should have said 23 years ago. You were always the better one, the smarter one, the one who built everything. I stole your work, your credit, your life, and in the end, you took it all back and built something even better without me. You won, Sarah, completely and utterly. The funny thing is, I'm almost proud of you. Is that insane? The woman I tried to destroy has become everything I pretended to be. Our children will figure it out eventually. They'll see what I should have seen, that their mother is extraordinary. I'll serve my time. When I get out, I'll disappear. You'll never hear from me again. You've earned your peace. The man who was too stupid to love you properly. David, I read the letter 3 times. Then I filed it away, not out of sentiment, but as a reminder. A reminder of what I'd survived, what I'd overcome, what I'd won. 6 months after the Phoenix Systems IPO, I received an unexpected invitation. Natasha was getting married to another tech executive and had somehow decided to invite me. The note attached said, "I owe you an apology. Please come." Curiosity got the better of me. I attended wearing a simple but elegant black dress and the diamond necklace I'd bought myself with my first CEO bonus. Natasha found me at the reception. "Sarah," she began, visibly uncomfortable. "Thank you for coming. Congratulations," I said simply. I wanted to apologize for everything. I was young and stupid and cruel. What I did, what I participated in, it was horrible. Yes, I agreed, it was. I thought David was this powerful, successful man. I didn't realize I was just the latest in a long line. And I didn't realize that you were the one who built everything. And now I'm marrying someone who actually respects me. And I wanted to thank you. Thank me? For exposing him. If you hadn't, I'd probably be in your position in 20 years. Erased, replaced, forgotten. I looked at this young woman who'd caused me so much pain and felt Nothing. No anger, no resentment. She'd been a symptom, not the disease. Learn from my story, I told her. Never give up your career for a man. Never let anyone dim your light. And always, always keep your own bank account. She nodded, tears in her eyes. I will, I promise. I left after that. There was nothing more to say. 3 years after David's conviction, I did something no one expected. I hired Linda Chen, my former mother-in-law, as a receptionist at Phoenix Systems. She'd lost everything when David went to prison: her house, her savings, her status in the community. At 73, she was working at a grocery store to make ends meet. She came to my office, prideful even in poverty. Why? She asked. Why would you help me after everything? Because you're an old woman who was lied to by her son, I said. Because hatred is exhausting, and because the best revenge is grace. She broke down crying. For the first time in 24 years, Linda Chen cried in front of me. I was so cruel to you, she sobbed, so unfair. I believed David's lies because I wanted to, because it was easier than admitting my son was a monster. I know, I said. You were a good wife, a good mother. You didn't deserve any of it. No, I agreed, I didn't. She worked for me for 2 years before retiring with a full pension. She never missed a day, never complained, and told everyone who would listen that her former daughter-in-law was the most remarkable woman she'd ever known. Forgiveness, I learned, could be its own form of victory. One by one, my children met the conditions of their trusts. Michael was first. He graduated from MIT, again, but this time actually attending classes instead of trading on his father's name. He worked for 2 years at a startup where no one knew who he was. His apology letter was to a girlfriend he'd treated the way David had treated me. I became him, he told me when he turned 30. I saw how he treated you and thought that was strength. It wasn't. It was cowardice. Emma took longer. She struggled with humility, with the idea that she had to earn anything. But she eventually graduated, worked as a teacher in an inner-city school, and wrote her apology to me. You deserved a daughter who defended you, she wrote. Instead, I gave you a stranger who contributed to your pain. I'm sorry, Mom, not for how you felt, but for what I did. James surprised everyone by becoming a therapist, specializing in family trauma. I want to help families avoid what we became, he explained. I want to teach children to see both parents as human. They all received their inheritances. But more importantly, they became people I could respect, people who'd earned their place in the world, rather than assuming it was owed to them. But here's the last secret, the one I've never told anyone until now. The Phoenix Systems IPO, the billions in valuation, the victory over David, it was all planned. Every move, every revelation, every dramatic moment. I found those incorporation documents in 2015, not 2021. I've known for 7 years that I owned half of Chen Technologies. For 7 years, I let David think he'd won. I let him humiliate me, betray me, grind me down in public. I played the broken housewife while secretly building an empire that would destroy him. Why? Because I needed him to feel completely secure, utterly invincible. I needed him to get so comfortable in his cruelty that he'd stop being careful. I needed my children to see him for what he was, not through my words, but through his actions when he thought there were no consequences. Every moment of pain in those 7 years was strategic. Every tear was calculated. Every humiliation was evidence. I could have exposed him in 2015, but if I had, he would have been a sympathetic figure, the brilliant CEO brought down by a bitter wife. My children would have hated me forever. The world would have seen me as vindictive. Instead, I waited. I let him hang himself with his own rope. I let him destroy his reputation, alienate his children, expose his true nature to the world. And then, when he was at his absolute peak, when he thought he'd finally won completely, I destroyed him with the truth I'd been sitting on for 7 years. Some would call it manipulation, deception, cruelty. I call it justice. David stole 23 years of my life. I took 7 years to take it back, plus interest. It's been 5 years since David went to prison. He gets out in 10 more, though I doubt he'll return to Silicon Valley. Last I heard, he was teaching computer basics to other inmates. Perhaps he's finally learning humility. I'm 52 now. I run a company worth $8 billion. I've been on the cover of Fortune, Forbes, and Time. They call me the Phoenix of Silicon Valley, the woman who rose from the ashes of her marriage to build an empire. My children and I have rebuilt our relationship slowly, carefully. They come to dinner once a month. We talk about their lives, their dreams, their struggles. Michael is launching his own startup, with his own code, his own ideas. Emma is getting her PhD in education, focusing on gender dynamics in STEM. James just got engaged to a wonderful woman who knows our whole story and loves him anyway. "Mom," Emma asked me recently, "do you ever regret it? The revenge?" "No," I said honestly. "I regret that it was necessary. I regret the 23 years I lost, but I don't regret taking back what was mine." "Would you do it again?" "No," I said, "because I would never again be with someone who would make it necessary. I'm dating now. A literature professor who's never heard of Silicon Valley drama and doesn't care about my money. He makes me laugh. He cooks while I work late. He's read every line of code I've written and pretends to understand it. 'You're brilliant,' he tells me. I know," I reply, and for the first time in my life, I believe it. Linda Chen died last year. She left me a letter. "Sarah, you were the daughter I should have treasured. Thank you for showing me grace I didn't deserve." Linda, I keep it in my office next to David's letter, reminders of the journey. People often ask me what advice I'd give to women in similar situations. Here it is: document everything, every contribution, every sacrifice, every moment of value you add. Not for revenge, but for protection. Never give up your earning power. A man who loves you will want you to thrive independently. Trust your instincts. If something feels wrong, it probably is. And most importantly, you are not crazy. You are not worthless. You are not nothing. You might be invisible now, but invisibility can be a superpower if you use it right. They can't defend against what they don't see coming. And that's my story. The real story of how I went from being called nothing to being worth everything. How I sat through humiliation while planning retribution. How I lost my family only to gain an empire and then rebuild my family on my own terms. Some of you might judge me for the deception, for playing such a long game. But until you've been systematically erased, until you've had your life's work stolen and credited to someone else, until you've been served divorce papers on Christmas morning after cooking dinner for your husband's mistress, you don't get to judge how I chose to fight back. Thank you for listening to my story. If you're watching this and seeing yourself in my pain, know that there is another side. It might take years to get there. It might require patience you didn't know you had. But you can reclaim your life. And to those who think they can erase their partners, steal their contributions, diminish their light, remember this: we're watching, we're documenting, and we're much, much smarter than you think. Please subscribe to Stories Grandma Never Told. I share new stories every single day, real stories from real people who've lived through the unimaginable and come out the other side. Until tomorrow, this is Sarah Chen, reminding you that the best revenge isn't just living well. It's taking back everything that was yours and building something even better. And sometimes, just sometimes, revenge is a dish best served with a smile and a subpoena.